Welcome to Patriots Corner Live with Dr. Hill Law, your source for unfiltered conservative analysis. We're here to dissect this week's biggest stories in politics and the economy, all from a grounded conservative perspective. No spin, just straight talk about what matters to you. We will delve into issues shaping our nation, hold our leaders accountable, and discuss and debate solutions that uphold our core American values. If you're new here, please hit the like button, subscribe, and the ring notification bell so you don't miss future streams. The mainstream narrative they have been feeding you in is a simple one that President Trump's actions against Iran were reckless, impulsive, and a flagrant violation of the Constitution. The media, his political opponents, and a handful of nervous European allies are all trying to paint the same picture: a president itching for a war, bypassing Congress as if it were a mere suggestion and acting completely and totally on his own. They use words like unprecedented, dangerous, dictator, king, and unconstitutional to scare you, to make you feel like the world is teetering on the brink of chaos, all because of one man. However, that whole story, that entire house of cards, hinges on a fundamental misunderstanding, or perhaps a deliberate and cynical misrepresentation of presidential power, or the grave reality of the Iranian threat and the very document that governs our country. They are counting on you not knowing what the Constitution actually says. They are hoping you won't look past their sound bites, their frantic cronies, and their self-important panel discussions. They are banking on the idea that if you just scream fire loud enough, no one will stop and ask if there's actually a flame. What if I told you that that story is not just wrong, but it is the exact opposite of the truth? What if I told you that President Trump's decision to order precision strikes on Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities wasn't just legally justified, but was a necessary and constitutionally grounded response to a clear and present danger? What if the chaos they keep talking about is actually the calculated, long overdue return of American strength and deterrence on the world stage? Today, we're not just going to challenge their narrative. We are going to take a sledgehammer to it. We're going to dismantle it piece by piece using the very document his critics pretend to revere, the United States Constitution. You can catch Patriots Corner 3 evenings a week, live on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, and Facebook. If you can't catch it live, you can listen to it on all the episodes on Spotify, Amazon, and iHeartRadio about an hour after it airs live, or you can catch them on our website at patriotscornerwithdrhillaw.com. That is patriotscornerwithdrhillaw.com. Also, you can register there for free with your email on our webpage, and you'll receive an email with the updated time and date of our next episodes if the time or date of the next episode needs to be changed. Your engagement is critical to the success of Patriots Corner, so please, if you have a question or want to make a statement, please do so. I will review them at the end of each segment, reading a few live and answering questions from respectful comments that foster intellectual debate. Your feedback is invaluable in shaping the discussion. Also, don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe to keep the conversation going. All right, all that up. All right, to get started. So I need you to do one thing for me. Forget what you've heard on cable news. Erase the talking points and the frantic headlines from your mind. The real story of Trump, Iran, and Article 2 isn't about warmongering. It's not about the ego or impulse. It's about the awesome and necessary responsibility of a commander-in-chief to fulfill his highest oath to defend the United States, its people, and its interest for those who have openly declared their intention to harm us. This is the story of how a president is using his constitutional powers to finally, after decades of failed policy, confront a terrorist regime, and in doing so, he is not making the world more dangerous. He is making the Middle East, and by extension, the entire world, a safer place. Now, I'm going to stop for a second. The way I usually do this is at the end of each section, I'll stop, check the my comments, see if I have anything, and then go from there. So let's go ahead and get started on segment one, understand Article 2 of the Constitution. To truly grasp why President Trump's actions are justified, to see through the fog of media outrage, you must first have to understand the toolkit the Constitution gives to every single president. The Founding Fathers were brilliant. They were not naive idealists. They were not pragmatic students of history who had seen empires rise and fall. They were unprecedented They understood the profound danger of a king of concentrating too much power in one person's hands. But they also knew the opposite danger, an even greater one in some respects, the danger of a government too weak, too slow, too indecisive to defend itself from its enemies. Their solution was a masterstroke of political engineering, a careful and deliberate separation of powers. This brings us to the core of the issue. Article 1 of the Constitution, as critics are so fond of pointing out, gives Congress the power to declare war. And that is absolutely true. But look at the language. A declaration of war is a formal, heavyweight process. It is a profound commitment meant for huge, sustained, nation-altering conflicts. It's Congress's job to decide if the entire nation, its blood and its treasure, should be committed to a total war. But the founders, in their wisdom, also knew that threats don't always arrive with a formal invitation of war. Waiting patiently for a congressional debate, an enemy can attack our assets, kill our citizens, or in the language of the 21st century, race towards a nuclear weapon in secret underground facilities. All right, now in those moments, the nation cannot be stuck in committee. It cannot be paralyzed by partisan gridlock. It needs a leader who can act with speed, precision, and authority. It needs a defender. That's what Article 2 is for. Article 2, Section 2 states, with deliberate clarity, the President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States. Let's be very clear, that is not just a fancy title. It is not a ceremonial role. It is a grant of immense and active authority. It is a job description. As Commander-in-Chief, the President has the inherent constitutional power to direct the armed forces to respond to attacks and to do what is necessary to protect the nation from what are called imminent threats. This power isn't a modern invention or reinterpretation. It is inherent to the office itself, and it has been used by presidents of both parties for over 200 years to keep America safe. I was just listening on news earlier. If you actually count, we've only had like 3 major wars ever declared. All right. Well, actually 4. They didn't declare the revolution, but you technically had Revolution, Civil War, World War I, World War II. Everything else was done off of presidential actions. There's like 130 of them total. So this is nothing new. Now think about it. This isn't a partisan issue. It's a historical fact. When Thomas Jefferson, one of the most revered founders, sent the Marines to fight the Barbary pirates for attacking American ships and enslaving American citizens, he didn't wait for a formal declaration of war from Congress. He acted under his Article 2 authority to protect American lives and he was the commander-in-chief, and he acted like it. Jump forward to the most dangerous moment of the Cold War, when John F. Kennedy blockaded Cuba during the missile crisis, placing the U.S. Navy as a ring of steel around the island. He was using the power as commander-in-chief to stop a catastrophic nuclear threat just 90 miles from our shore. Okay, and then he didn't ask Congress for permission. The threat was too immediate. The stakes too high. He acted, from Ronald Reagan's righteous strike on Libya after a terrorist attack killed Americans to Bill Clinton's necessary military actions in the Balkans to stop a genocide. The president is crystal clear and unbroken. President Trump did not violate the Constitution. Presidents have always, under their Article 2 powers, had the power to conduct limited, targeted military operations to protect America and its interest without a formal war declaration from Congress. And if you actually look into all the different wars acts and stuff, they roughly can commit even ground troops for up to like 15 or 45 days. It's somewhere between half a month and a month and a half before they officially have to have a congressional declaration of war. And also, Congress does have the ability, since they have the power to purse, if they don't want to declare war but don't want to tell the president to bring them back, they can cut the funds. This isn't just a tradition, it is a legal doctrine. For decades, the Department of Justice, under both Republican and Democratic administrations, has articulated a consistent legal framework for this. It boils down to 2 simple but crucial questions. First, does the proposed military action serve important national interest? And second, is the action a full-scale war in the constitutional sense, or is it a limited operation in nature, scope, and duration? Which means that's exactly what President Trump did. He did not declare war. He did not go to war. Now, he calls it the 12-day war, maybe entering the 12-day war. That's because that was Israel in Iran's war, not America's war. We launched a limited, targeted operation for a short time to assist an ally of ours and to stop a terrorist state from being able to get a nuclear weapon. Now, I've heard all this stuff today about, oh, there's some leak that we didn't totally destroy it. Okay. And luckily, somebody came on, if anybody saw the news tonight, and actually explained how we destroyed it. Even if Iran still has nuclear materials left, the main reactor that actually takes that nuclear material, once it's enriched to 90% and turns it into an actual metal ball that then goes into the nuclear bomb, is totally destroyed. So even if they magically were able to get some 60% enriched uranium out and they were able to have gotten a couple 10,000 pound centrifuges out somehow, and they could set them up somewhere and then in the next year or so get that to 90%, they would still need a big, huge reactor, which was the Tons facility, or the other one that one of the other two we attacked. That facility is where they actually have the reactor that turns it into the nuclear actual weapons grade material, and that is totally destroyed. It was above ground. We dropped a bunker buster on it too to try to make sure we don't just got the reactor on top that destroys the final step in it, but also some of the enrichment centrifuges that were under it, because it was also where you start. It was where you do your initial conversion and where you do your final conversion. That is totally destroyed. All right. And we haven't had enough time for anybody to have an idea. If they're going off of what Iran has said, of course they're going to deny that we destroy their facilities. They want to look strong to their people. They know they're on the brink of their people uprising out of oppression and tearing down the mullahs. They know that. And they don't want to lose their regime. So they're going to try to make them think that they still have that power, whether they really have it or not. And then with all the sanctions we put on them, the immense amount of money they have spent on this war, and they have spent dispensing all of their ammunitions, they're not going to be able to have the money to restart that program. There is no way. Now let's apply that test. Protect an American life. Let me get back to where I was at. Protect American lives and the lives of our allies. Check. Deterring aggressive regimes from hostile acts. Check. Preventing a rogue state, the world's leading state sponsor of terror, from acquiring the world's most dangerous weapons. That is the very definition of a vital national interest that justifies a president's actions as commander-in-chief. So no, this is not a loophole. This is the system working exactly as it was designed. The founders gave Congress the solemn power to commit the entire nation to long, drawn-out wars. But they gave the president the power, and more importantly, the responsibility to act as commander-in-chief to defend the nation from immediate threats. This context is everything. The media and President Trump's political opponents are trying to frame his actions as some unprecedented dictatorial power grab. They have to do this because to admit the truth would be to admit their argument has no merit. They conveniently ignore over 200 years of American history and presidential precedent. That's what they're doing. All right. And I didn't even mention the actions, both George Bush's plus Obama. Obama had launched like 3 or 4 different military actions, all without congressional approval. Yes, he briefed them after the fact. And he even they tried to act, and they even had to take it back that President Trump did brief the leadership before then. Of course, he didn't brief the whole freaking committees, because he knows if he briefs a whole liberal committee, they would leak the shit out. And by the time our guys got over there, Iran would have had jets up waiting for them, because they would have known they were coming. The decoy crew decoy 6 B-2s that he sent to Guam would have been pointless. So the argument that Trump needs a permission slip from Congress for every move against an aggressive Iranian regime isn't just historically ignorant. It is a recipe for national security disaster. It would mean a president has to sit on his hands and watch an enemy build a bomb, unable to do a single thing until a committee somewhere on Capitol Hill finishes debating the issue. This is not what the founders wanted, and it is certainly not what the Constitution says. President Trump's authority isn't pulled from the thin air. It is drawn directly from the text of Article 2 and is backed by a long and distinguished line of presidential history. He is acting squarely within the traditional constitutional powers of his office. As we come to the end of our first segment, I would like to remind you to please like, comment, follow, or hit the subscribe button so you won't miss future episodes. Also, I will now take any questions and reply to a few comments if I have any before starting the next segment, and also get me a little drink. Please don't forget to check out our website at Patriots Corner with drhillaw.com. That's Patriots Corner with drhillaw.com. I don't know why Restream did not go up, but for some reason, I'm having trouble getting on the Restream from here. I guess I'm going to have to end it because it's not, I don't think it's working. Yeah, it still says up and coming. All right, I'll just got to end it because it did not start. Worked the first time, but these last two times, or actually, yeah, the last two times it has not wanted to work. Alrighty. Well, since don't have any comments right now, I'll go ahead and get started on segment 2. Deconstructing the strategy, the red line. Now that we've established the firm, unshakable constitutional ground President Trump is on, let's look at the specifics of what he did last Saturday, and more importantly, why he did it. This wasn't an act of random aggression. He didn't have a plan to do it. He had a plan. It was the culmination of a clear, consistent, and publicly stated policy from day one. President Trump has been crystal clear with the entire world about his stance. Iran cannot and will not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. This isn't a preference. It wasn't a talking point. It was a red line. All right. And unlike President Obama, there is a critical distinction. Unlike his predecessors, he didn't rely on the failed and dangerous policies of appeasement. He refused to kick the can down the road. He refused to sign deals that would pour billions of dollars into the pockets of a terrorist regime, effectively funding their malign activities across the region in a temporary, easily revoked promise. Instead, he drew a clear, unambiguous line in the sand and dared the Iranian regime to cross it. He gave them a choice. For every 60 days, he held the door wide open. He offered them a chance to come to the table to negotiate a real lasting agreement that would permanently end their nuclear ambitions and bring them back into the community of nations. But obviously, they didn't want to do that. But then the mullahs in Tehran, drunk on the billions they received from the last administration on pallets of money, and last two actually, and convinced that Americans had lost its nerve, chose the path of defiance. They chose arrogance when they walked away from negotiations, when they openly boasted about restarting their enrichment centrifuges. They made their decision. They crossed the red line. And in that moment, President Trump showed them and the entire world that he is not Obama or Biden. He showed them that America red lines are no longer imaginary. When an enemy crosses that line, he is not afraid to act. So, acting under his Article 2 authority as commander-in-chief, he unleashed a military operation so complex, so precise, and so technologically overwhelming that no other military in the world could have even conceived of it, let alone pulled it off. They may have conceived of it, but they couldn't have pulled it off. Let's be very clear about what this was and what it wasn't. This was not an invasion. This was not the beginning of a ground war. It was a surgical strike applied with devastating accuracy. Imagine the scene. 7 B-2 stealth bombers, the ghost of the United States Air Force, flew thousands of miles and penetrated deep into the heart of Iran, completely undetected by a sophisticated air defense system that Israel had taken out. They arrived over their target like phantoms in the night, and then they delivered their payload, 14 GBU 57 massive ordnance penetrators, or MOPs, that weighed 30,000 pounds each. So to sit there and try to tell me that taking a 30,000-pound bomb, that's another argument against another argument these people the other day, but taking a 30,000-pound bomb, 2 of them right behind each other, dropping them on the exact same spot, and at that, dropping them down an air vent, which the air vent's exact job is to get air from 300 feet down up. and tell me it did no damage is just, it's not physically possible. There's no way that it did not collapse those or destroy them. These are not ordinary bombs. These are bunker busters of almost imaginable power, each one weighing 30,000 pounds. They were dropped directly on top of Iran's most fortified, most secret nuclear site, one buried deep within a mountain for the express purpose of making it untouchable. They also have their fuses are smart fuses, and they do not explode when it hits the ground. They do not actually go off or explode until it gets to a certain depth. That's when they go off. And they put two behind each other to ensure that they tore through over 300 feet of the mountain reinforced rock, obliterating the Friedel underground facility that the mullahs believed was invulnerable. The crown jewel of their nuclear program was turned to dust and rubble in a matter of seconds. And that was just the beginning. While this was happening, another 124 aircraft, including F-22s and F-35 fighter sweeps, Navy carrier F-18EF strike fighters, and FA-18 electronic warfare planes were attacking the Natanz and Isfahan nuclear enrichment facilities, along with some of those flying protection for the 7 B-2s. At the exact same time, an Ohio-class submarine, Silent Scene, had launched 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles almost 2 hours before that literally stayed up in the air undetected, and land did not strike until the B-2s were flying out of the country to work as a distraction to keep Iran looking at where the Tomahawks were going versus where the B-2s had been and were going. Because there was a report that same night that there was like a 5.2 earthquake. Well, I can promise you, if you drop over 430,000 pounds of ordnance more than 300 feet below ground, it is going to register an earthquake. I mean, just think of it. When down in Louisiana, when they have a game at LSU, the geology people pick up like a 1.9 or 2.2 earthquake just from the people stomping their feet in the stands. Now you're talking about taking 430,000 pounds of ordnance with a big explosion as it is each individually itself, 30,000 pounds of it, then putting it 300 feet underground. You're going to make a nice big earthquake. And then also you had KC-135s and KC-46 aerial refueling tankers provided post-strike fuel for everybody, and the timing was perfect. The coordination, the timing, the sheer technological brilliance, it had to be perfect. The execution was flawless, and before the dust even settled, before the Iranian military even knew what had hit them, every single American plane, the B-2s, the fighters, were out of Iranian airspace. Okay, I'm working as a project manager in real estate development. It's hard to get 10 different project managers to work together, much less that. I mean, it's insane. What is it? Remove this, huh? But yeah, it's crazy. Now they were never detected. Not a single shot was fired at them. They came, they destroyed the threat, and they vanished. It was a decisive, overwhelming, and unanswerable demonstration of American power used not to start a war, but to enforce a red line and prevent one. They delivered. Why did it? Yeah, on the top of Iran's. The bunker busters toward the front of. Why did my thing go? I think I messed up and went backwards. But that was into that one anyways. But pretty much the results of President Trump's decisive actions are sending the shockwave through the world, and nowhere is that impact clearer or more welcome than in how it directly supports and defends our closest and most important allies in the Middle East, the state of Israel, and its ongoing war against Iran, which obviously before, when I made this yesterday, since then we've had the ceasefire agreement started. It looked like it was going all day, and then right before I jumped on here, there was a report of Israel intercepting 2 drones that they believe that came out of Iran. So we'll see how long it sticks. But it was a message to Iran. It was about strategically crippling an enemy that poses a daily mortal threat to our friends by obligating obliterating Iran's primary nuclear weapons facilities, the United States single-handedly removed the most significant existential threat from Israel's doorstep. For years, Israeli leaders have warned the world about the catastrophic danger of a nuclear-armed Iran, a regime whose leaders have openly called for Israel to be wiped off the map. This single decisive action accomplished what years of diplomacy and sanctions could not. It took that existential threat off the table. This bold action demonstrates to our friends, and just as importantly to our enemies, that America's security guarantees are not just words on a page. They are not just diplomatic pleasantries. They are solemn promises backed by the most advanced, most precise, and most determined fighting force on the planet. When America says we have your back, the action proves we mean it. And for anyone out there who is rightfully worried about America being dragged into another endless war in the Middle East, it's crucial to understand that this entire strategy was brilliantly designed to prevent just that. All right? The probability of America providing anything more than the kind of air support and precision strikes we just witnessed are almost zero. Why? Because our allies, led by incredibly capable and battle-hardened Israeli defense forces, are already on the ground. They're right there. They don't need to fly in the Middle East. They're already there. President Trump understands a fundamental truth that past leaders have forgotten. We don't need to put American boots on the ground in every conflict. We can provide the unparalleled air power, the advanced intelligence, and the strategic support that our allies need to win their own fights. This is a masterful partnership, the new model for 21st century alliances. Israel provides the ground force, the human intelligence, the regional expertise. America provides the high-tech, overwhelming firepower for the air and the sea that no other nation can match. It's a more sustainable, and more effective way to secure our shared interest and to support our allies without getting bogged down in the kind of protracted ground war that nobody wants. It projects American strength and resolve while empowering our allies to secure their own future. As we come to the end of our, well, this isn't the first segment, but I'll remind you, please comment and follow. And then that was the end of that segment. So I'm going to get on the segment 4. I had some people in here, but nobody in here right now. So I'll go ahead and get me a drink, get on the segment 4. All right. Now, a new Middle East and the path to peace. Beyond the immediate battlefield, this strike has set in motion a geopolitical earthquake, a fundamental realignment that has redrawn the map of the Middle East for the better. The media sees only a military strike. They miss the grand strategy entirely. That strategy is breathtakingly simple in its logic. To achieve a lasting peace, you must first cut off the source of the region's instability, and for decades that source has been the revolutionary expansionist regime in Iran. First and most directly, this strike defunds terror. The Iranian nuclear program wasn't just a military project, it was the regime's primary source of pride and a massive sink for its national treasure. With that program now in ashes and its economy already crippled by sanctions, Iran's ability to fund its vast network of proxy terrorist organizations, groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and Hamas in Gaza, is now severely diminished. This has an immediate stabilizing effect on the entire region. It chokes off the money that fuels so much conflict, so much chaos, and so much bloodshed from the shores of the Mediterranean to the mountains of Yemen. Now, obviously, some of these rebel groups will probably try to do something crazy or try to attack America to get Iran's attention. But if Iran's smart, after what President Trump has already done, they know they don't want that. I mean, come on. That's why when they launched 14 rockets back at our base there in the Middle East, our largest one at that in Qatar, they actually let Qatar know the exact time that they were going to do it. In other words, so they could ensure that we had no human lives in the line, no expensive equipment in the way, that we could evacuate all of our planes and everything, that we could get all of our personnel out of the way. And then if for some reason our defense systems didn't take one down, the worst thing they would do is destroy some buildings or destroy some the ground. But it was more in the fact that Iran controls their state media, so they could actually show their people, hey, look, we're attacking back in America. And then they probably showed them some explosion somewhere and said, "Oh, hey, look, we hit the base. We killed Americans. Death to America." So they can hold on to power and retain that fear of their people that one, that they can keep. One, they got to fight off the hardliners who actually believe everything they believe. They don't want them trying to overturn the regime, but they also don't want a good majority of the people who would love to knock them out and not be oppressed. They don't want them uprising either. So they're trying to keep that strength. Another reason why they would sit there and try to say, "Oh no, you didn't destroy nothing. We'll be back up in a couple of weeks." That's bullshit. They're going to tell their people that because they want them to think that they still have the power, that they have the ability to make people do what they want. That is the only reason. It's all propaganda. But the strategy goes even, back to what I was talking about, the strategy goes even further into the realm of brilliant diplomacy. President Trump's decision to befriend the new president of Syria and to lift sanctions on that country was a stunning strategic act designed to pull a key piece off the chessboard. For years, Syria has been Iraq's primary state-level ally, a land bridge for weapons and influence. By extending a hand of friendship and economic partnership, he has given Syria a clear and compelling choice: stay shackled to a falling, isolated, and now military humbled Iran, or join a new prosperous future with the rest of the modern Arab world. This move opens the door for Syria to potentially join the Abraham Accords, the historic peace agreements that are already transforming the region, which would further isolate the mullahs in Tehran and leave them surrounded by a new alliance for peace. This monumental shift creates a powerful new reality, one that could finally lead to regime change in Iran, not from the outside, not through American invasion, but from within. With the regime weakened, its prestige shattered, its military humbled, and its people emboldened by the sight of the regime's vulnerability, the choice would finally be left to the Iranian people themselves. And if that moment comes, President Trump has made it clear that we will not repeat the disastrous mistakes of the past. There will be no American boots on the ground to oversee the transition. We're not going to occupy. There will be no Western-led nation building. Instead, we would empower a coalition of our own Middle Eastern allies, nations like Israel, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, to help the Iranian people set up a new modern government. A government that would be acceptable to the Middle Eastern customs and integrated into the region, led by the people who know it best. This is a vision for peace that respects regional leadership and cultural sovereignty, ensuring a stability that can actually last. So that's what we're looking at. This is the kind of deep, factual analysis you will simply never get from the mainstream media because they don't want you to know it. And they're too invested in their own fell narratives, too committed to their political agenda to admit the truth. Their business model relies on fear and division, not on clarity and constitutional understanding. If you believe in looking at the facts for yourself, if you believe in understanding the Constitution, and if you believe in supporting a foreign policy that puts American strength and security first, then make sure you subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss a single piece of our analyses. And most importantly, share this video, send it to anyone you know who is tired of being told what to believe by a media that has failed them time and time again. The truth has to get out there, and you are the ones who can make that all happen. So in conclusion, a time for resolve. So let's go back to where we started. The narrative of President Trump is a reckless, unconstitutional warmonger hell-bent on dragging America into a new conflict with Iran isn't just false, it is the exact opposite of the truth. It is a deliberate inversion of reality. Democrats can't stand losing. We've seen it in detail how his authority comes directly and unambiguously from Article 2 of the Constitution as the authority of the commander-in-chief to defend this nation, a power that is not new, not radical, but has been a cornerstone of American national security used by presidents for centuries to protect this nation from harm. We've shown that his strategy was not impulsive or chaotic. It was a calculated, legal, and necessary response to a clear and present threat. It was the result of a clear red line, a diplomatic opportunity that was rejected, and a decisive action to neutralize a danger before it could fully materialize. We have seen these precise actions directly aid our most vital ally, Israel, by providing an aerial shield and eliminating an existential threat, all without dragging America into another bloody ground war. It is a new model of partnership, one based on shared goals and shared responsibilities. And finally, we've laid out The grand strategy that this action serves the creation of a safer, more stable region built by defunding terror, by brilliantly realigning former enemies like Syria, and by creating the conditions for the Iranian people to finally choose their own future, with their regional neighbors helping to secure a lasting peace. Ultimately, President Trump's approach to Iran is a powerful and a successful example of peace through strength. It is a total and unapologetic rejection of the failed doctrine of appeasement that for years had rewarded our enemies, endangered our friends, and made the world a more dangerous place. Thanks to the doctrine of appeasement, Ukraine is being invaded. Now, obviously, President Trump wants to stop it, but the problem is now because Russia was already emboldened to invade Ukraine, now the only way to stop it is either through a peace agreement or with a World War III. Now, that's when we have to worry, is if President Trump was to have attacked Russia, not Iran. Attacking Iran is not going to start a World War III. And as far as Iran threatened to shut down the Strait of Hormuz or whatever, they would be stupid to do that, because then even China would leave them alone. Because while the Strait of Hormuz would not affect our oil per se, it would affect oil prices in general, global wide. It wouldn't affect ours. It would affect global. It would affect ours too, but it wouldn't affect our supply because we don't get any oil from that area. China, Russia, that's where they get. China gets the majority of their oil from, comes out of that area through the Strait of Hormuz. So they would be stupid to do that, because then their greatest ally would become an enemy. So I don't think they're going to do it. This action proves that American leadership, when used with confidence, clarity, and constitutional authority, doesn't lead to war. It is the best and often the only way to guarantee peace. The world is safer and America is more respected because a president was willing to ignore the failed foreign policy establishment and act decisively to defend our nation. That isn't a violation of American values. It is the very heart of them. And now, while I understand people like older millennial and some of the people on the right were worried about President Trump making this action because they were worried about a protracted ground war. I understood why they were worried about that, because we look historically, you look at George Bush Sr., two of the last major Republicans before Trump, had done consistently what Democrats did, and that was to go into the ground wars, to give in to Northrop Grumman and all them, to literally make them billions, because they make more money when we're in war, because we don't really need them to. We don't put as much money into development and R&D of military equipment or stuff when we're not in war, even though we really should, because then by the time we get into war, everybody else, all the other communist countries and dictatorships have been spending all their money on building up their military technology. And then when we end up in war with them, we're way behind instead of being where we should. And we get our butts kicked at first. We lose way more people than we should. And then when we finally start getting our technology built up and get everything over there, we do that. Just like for the fact when in 2002, late 2001, early 2002, when we went over into Iraq and Afghanistan, our guys were driving around 1960s, 1970s, and the early 90s Humvees that were not made for modern warfare. They did not. They were plastic window roll downs. They were not bulletproof armored Humvees protected for IEDs or roadside bombs or anything like that. Half of the what you consider, it's old now, but the newer equipment, the bigger armored vehicles, all came during that 20 years. Now, if we had been working on that stuff during the time between, because everybody already kind of knew where it was concentrating on that time, the concentration was going to be on the Middle East, they could have started working on that. And then when we'd gone over there, we could have kicked ass a lot faster. Maybe instead of it taking 20 years, it would have took 5 or 10. But for some reason, when we're not at war, we decide to not. And that's why the big military complex like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, all of them are pushing for us to go to war, because they want those government contracts to develop new military technologies that will keep these soldiers safe. Because for some reason, our government doesn't want to think anything about defense when we're not at war to defend against something. They only want to spend money on defense and put budget money on defense whenever we're actually at war. I mean, if you think right before World War II, right after World War I, we had cut our defense spending down. We were really short on ships. We were far behind when it came to jets and planes. We were still flying airplanes from World War I, while the Japanese had the Japanese Zeros, and we didn't even have full tanks yet, really. We had some tanks, but not like Germany had. And for the first little bit of the war, when we entered it, we got our asses kicked until we finally started building our modern aircraft carriers, our modern battleships, all of that. Then we finally caught up, but we lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers by the time that happened. So we should, maybe if we actually spent money on developing defense systems while we are not at war, then the money people behind the military industrial complex would be less likely to try to push Congress into wars. And then also we would have, when we do have to go to a war, we would know that we have the best and most advanced military equipment at that time, outside, even above Russia and China, and not get our ass kicked at the beginning. I mean, it's insane that we wait until we end up in a war before we spend any money on defense systems or any type of new technology. And that's literally what pushes Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and all them guys to literally push for us to go to war. That's why they push the Democrats and the Republicans, war hawks, to literally try to do nation building, to whatever, because that's where they make money. If we actually made them money while we weren't at war, then, and if you want to think about, a lot of the greatest technologies that we have as people, American citizens, came from military R&D. It was used by military first, and then we got it. Then they declassify it, and it becomes used in civilian world. Versus not having upgraded material and the best equipment for our soldiers when they get sent into something. But also now, Trump is a businessman. He's not a politician. He's not George Bush, or he's not a third George GW, and he's proven that. He doesn't want to go to war. That's the last thing he wants to do, but he's not afraid to put his foot down and use our air superiority and our air power and our allies in the area to do something. He's not going to go in and drop an invasion into Iraq Iran, like we did Iraq and Afghanistan or Lebanon or any of that, because he knows that we already have Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Israel, all right there. They don't have to travel across an ocean, fly halfway around the world, 7,000 miles to get there. They can be on the ground in minutes. They've already got people inside Iran. That's why they had the information they had to do the attack they did. And I hate to say it, but it's about time our B-2s are put together. By the time they were built, this is really the first major operation they've ever had to pull. It's the largest, the longest. Because of the fact that the B-2 is only 35 years old. It was built in the late 90s, I think. Hello. But yeah, it was built in like the late 90s. So it really is. It's only been used, I think, once before, but never to this capacity, never to this. And if you knew how much each one of those 19 B-2s cost, I'd say it's about time they got used for what we spent the money for. But anyways, I was trying to see if we got any belts in here, but that's about it. So in closing, please join us every, usually it's Mondays. Today it was this Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday evening. Current times are not set exactly, so please subscribe or follow and sign up on our website, Patriots Corner with drhilllaw.com. to receive notifications every time we go live. Each episode will be uploaded and available on Rumble, YouTube, and Spotify. And then Amazon and Apple and Amazon, iHeartRadio, and Spotify within about an hour after the show's over. It automatically is uploaded onto YouTube because that's what I did, YouTube and Rumble Live. But for some reason, my Rumble is not working today or last time, so I have to upload on Rumble too. So I'll keep on getting somebody spamming me with the same stuff, insulting me with emojis. So y'all have a good night.